Welcome and greetings to you all. My name is Jasmine Allender and I'm Dean of the Humanities Division at UC Santa Cruz. Thank you for joining us today for Unbound, the life and legacy of Asian American community historian Judy Young. We're delighted to host this gathering and so pleased to do so with the blessing of Judy's family and friends, and dearly wish we could be together in person instead of meeting virtually. We look forward to having another opportunity to come together around Judy's legacy later this academic year, and we'll keep you all informed as those plans come together. I'd like to start by thanking all of our co-sponsors, the Asian American Pacific Islander Resource Center, the Center for Racial Justice, Cal College, the Critical Race and Ethnic Studies Department, the Humanities Division, and Oaks College. I'd also like to thank everyone on the event organizing committee. So if you could all please wave so that we could acknowledge you and thank you. We're grateful for your efforts and your support, which has enabled this meaningful event to commemorate Judy Young. I'd now like to introduce Professor Alice Yang, who will lead off our program. Alice Yang is Associate Professor of History here at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she also co-directs the Center for the Study of Pacific War Memories and served as provost of Adlai E. Stevenson College. She received her PhD in history from Stanford University and has been a member of the UCSC faculty since 1993. Her publications include Historical Memories of the Japanese American Internment and the Struggle for Redress, Major Problems in Asian American History, and What Did the Internment of Japanese Americans Mean? Winner of the university's Excellence in Teaching Award, she teaches courses on historical memory, World War II, Asian American history, race, gender, and oral history. She is currently researching transnational memories of World War II in the Pacific. Alice, I turn things to you.
Thank you, Dean Allender. Before we begin, I would like to share a few details about the event tonight. We are using the standard Zoom meeting format and ask that everyone keep their microphones muted during the scheduled programming. You are welcome to keep your cameras on if you prefer. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions or share memories at the end of the community and academic forums. Please click on the raise hand under the reactions tab in Zoom, and we'll call on you in the order that you respond. There also will be a more extended time to share your memories of Judy at the close of the event for anyone who would like to stay longer. And we invite you to submit your questions, tributes, or memories into the chat box at any time. This event will be recorded and will be accessible on the Critical Race and Ethnic Studies Department's website following the event. If you prefer that your image is not recorded, please keep your camera off. Now for our program celebrating Judy Young, a beloved member of the UCSC community. Born in 1946, Judy passed away on December 14th last year in San Francisco, the city where she was born and returned to years after she retired from UCSC in 2004. Her passing devastated Judy's family, colleagues, former students, friends, and all of us who were lucky enough to have had her in our lives. Many of today's speakers have paid tribute to Judy in other forums, including a special issue of Amerasia Journal that celebrates Judy's work as a civil rights activist, a community and public scholar, a pioneer of oral history methodology, and a prize-winning author. Today's program also highlights Judy's contributions to UCSC, where she taught Asian American studies, women's history, oral history, and mixed race history. Judy was a true university leader, committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, a tireless advocate for Asian American studies and affirmative action, a beloved teacher, and a supportive mentor. Among her many scholarly and community awards, Judy also was recognized by UCSC, where she received an Excellence in Teaching Award in 1999 and an Excellence Through Diversity Award in 2003. She will be deeply missed, but today we're celebrating her incredible legacy. We'll begin with a short film about Judy by filmmaker Felicia Lowe. It was the book Island, The History and Poetry of Angel Island Immigration Station, edited by Judy, along with Himmark Lai and Jenny Lim, that inspired Felicia to make her beautiful and moving documentary, Carved in Silence. That was the beginning of their collaboration. And Felicia told me she never made another film without Judy's consultation. I'm sure you'll appreciate this tribute by Felicia to her dear friend.
I met Judy 40 years ago when I started research on my film about Angel Island Immigration Station. Her willingness to share her knowledge and resources was immediate. Her generosity is legendary. What I didn't know is that her parents called her Daeung, number 5, as she was the 5th child of 6 born into the family. She developed her love for learning and books early on.
I remember going there for the first time with my grammar school class. That just opened a vista for me to explore the rest of the world from my protected environment in Chinatown. My parents refused to give me permission to get a library card because they were afraid that if I lost any of the books or they would have to pay for them. To get around that, I forged my parents' signature on the library card application. And I continued using that library every weekend and read just about every book I could in the children's room.
I was awestruck by Judy's commitment to Chinese literacy. She even turned down Lowell High for Galileo so she could stay in Chinese school through graduation. And she continued to study Chinese in college. Her ability to speak, read, and write Chinese served her well throughout her career. Judy created the first Chinese American collection at the Chinatown branch of her youth, as well as establishing the first Asian American library in the country. At East West, she honed her skills as a journalist, then moved on to author books. Many focused on the contributions of Chinese American women, like these she told me about in an interview about the YWCA.
There was a very active group of women in the late 1920s who decided that we're going to build this building. And they drove cars.
Judy's enthusiasm for her subjects never waned, but what was surprising and unpredictable is that she ended up marrying one of her interviewees. Retirement from UC Santa Cruz did not slow her down. Even after Eddie's death, Judy continued to mentor, consult, speak, and spent time with family. Her last project was as co-curator of an exhibit on the Chinese in California. I produced the videos for the exhibit, much of it based on research Judy provided. Author Ruth Ann Lumacun said Judy had an incredible impact both during her life and for all time. She was the best friend a person could hope for, and she never quit being a librarian. I think everybody whose life she touched would agree.
We will now have remembrances from friends of Judy. First, it's my honor to introduce a dear friend of Judy's, George Au. George is well known in Santa Cruz County as a local Chinese American history enthusiast, real estate developer, and philanthropist. He has funded over 1,000 scholarships for high school students, published several history books about Santa Cruz, and provided the vision and financial backing for the new Dragon Archway on Front Street, honoring the city's Chinatown neighborhood. George,
Thank you, Alice. You can all hear me okay? Great. Judy Young. I remember Judy's smile amongst her prodigious life work of writing and telling our story. Judy and her friends, sisters and brothers in writing, preordained to start from almost zero, to find and resurrect our stories into magnificent chronicles that showed that we were human, courageous, brave, enterprising, capable, and worthy. In our history, so many lives lost, mangled in the hardest, most dangerous jobs. Others ground away by day-to-day work until exhaustion for pennies. Building America, making others rich, and providing the muscle and glue and brains that made everyday life work, while barely surviving and reviled, just like the Latinx people today. Judy could see the spirits of these valiant sojourners, the hungry ghosts walking the hills and valleys, the streets night and day, saying, "Remember us, tell our stories," whispers and shouts of "We were here too. We belong in the history of this United States of America." Write down what we have accomplished and how we lived and how they tried to stop us from having wives and children. So we died alone. Now we roam all over California and the West, restless ghosts, just like in Hamlet and Macbeth. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of us up and down the streets of Santa Cruz and the hills of the University of California at Santa Cruz campus. Can you hear them too? The smiling fifth daughter of 6 children, mom and dad working so hard, so long, and so ingeniously smart to barely provide half a bowl of rice and some vegetables in San Francisco Chinatown, and all the rest. BA in English Literature and Chinese from San Francisco State. MA in Library Science from University of California at Berkeley. PhD in Ethnic Studies from Cal. Who could have imagined this daughter of Chinese immigrants could have done this? Mom and dad and family were so proud. We knew she could do it. San Francisco Chinatown, the big city of the overseas Chinese, the Chinese diaspora that scattered all over the world to make a bit of gold, to send home and keep mom and dad and sis and brother from actually starving to death. Such perseverance and love in honoring the hundreds of thousands of us not remembered, not given the credit or recognized for what our Chinese pioneers did in giving their lives, doing the work of building America. Judy and her friends, her peers, you guys here, relentlessly writing and researching and interviewing changed that. In the course of doing an interview, doing her life's work, Judy was rewarded by the gods and the hungry ghosts. She had done extensive interviews with a jewel of a man and found him to be extraordinary, super, heart-thumping. She would write a great book about him. Eddie Fung's contact with Judy revealed that she was extraordinary, super. They looked at each other and heard the soundtrack for Some Enchanted Evening. Now they are together again. The end. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Now we have Judy's friend, Buck G. Buck is board president of the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation and also serves on the boards of the Asia Society of Northern California and the Chinatown Media and Arts Collective. He retired in 2008 from Cisco Systems, where he was vice president and general manager of the data center business unit. Buck?
Thank you, Alice. I first met Judy way back in 2008 when I first joined the board of the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation, which is pictured behind me, Angel Island. I would visit Eddie Wong, then the executive director at the foundation office, and I would run into Judy. The first time I met Judy, she was working in the office with student interns, a big stack of files on the table, poring over the pages of the research that she had accumulated for over 30 years about Angel Island and its immigrants. For friends of Judy, I don't need to explain the history of Chinese exclusion and the role that the immigration played in keeping out Chinese and other Asian immigrants in the early 20th century. Decommissioned in the 1940s, the immigration station was abandoned, fell into disrepair, and was vandalized by visitors in State Park. By 1970, the immigration station buildings were slated to be demolished and the space planned to be used for campground. But fortunately, Asian American historians in San Francisco rediscovered the poems in the barracks building. They began a successful effort to stop the demolition of the building and save the station for history. But just as important as saving the buildings on the site was Judy's dedication and her work to save and document the actual experiences and the personal stories of immigrants who went through the island. Working with local historians Himmark Lai and Jenny Lim, Judy co-authored and published in Island in 1980, first documenting the historical importance of Angel Island and the stories. It included English translations of the barracks building poems, as well as recollections of Chinese immigrants who went through. It became a central reading for Asian American studies students. But she kept working on more stories, tracking down detainees, as we heard, and capturing oral histories. I remember visiting the National Archives in San Bruno, where the immigration records are kept now, and Judy showing me the various files of people she was trying to find. She spent so much time there. She was well known and well respected by all the staff. By the time she was done, the foundation office required 2 large file cabinets to store all the folders that Judy had accumulated. Her research now resides at Stanford University. Later on in 2010, Judy partnered with Eric Lee, to publish another book, Angel Island, Immigrant Gateway to America, which told a more complete story of the island, of other immigrants coming through, including from Mexico, India, Korea, Japan, and Russia. And she donated her portion of the proceeds to the foundation. Thanks to Judy. And Judy was always willing to help the foundation, coming up from Santa Cruz as needed to give lectures to visiting groups of academics on the island or around the Bay Area. She continued to consult on our historical interpretive materials in our programming, in our literature, and the website. Several years ago, Judy and I were on a panel at Cal talking about growing up as children of paper sons. These are Chinese immigrants who arrived on Angel Island bearing false identities. She recalled the unspoken secrets of a neighborhood where uncles and aunts hid family relationships to protect their paper thin deceit. For me as a child, I was always confused whether my grandfather, as my parents would call him, was really my grandfather, because our friends in the neighborhood would call him my uncle. That's typical. The last time I saw Judy was on the steps outside her place in San Francisco, and she told me she was moving back from Santa Cruz. We talked about getting involved in more foundation projects after she got settled in, but then she got started on another project and really didn't have the time to help in the research on the new museum we created on Angel Island, the newly restored hospital building, now called the Angel Island Immigration Museum. In the new museum, the long arc of U.S. immigration history is told again in personal stories of immigrants, both historical and contemporary. We hope to open the museum post-COVID in the public early next year and have a big celebration. And although Judy never had the opportunity to visit the museum, she left her fingerprints throughout the exhibits. It's a part of Judy's legacy that will help educate the next generation. And it's a testament to her work on what her life meant to the Asian American community. Yeah, we'll all miss her. Alice.
Thank you, Buck. So we'll now proceed to our community forum with 4 of Judy's former students, Mana Hayakawa, Laura Collier-Chan, Yukiya Jerry Waki, and Kyo Tang Ishikawa. I've asked our panelists to help us have an informal conversation about Judy by responding to 2 questions. First, how did Judy and her courses affect their sense of self and community? Second, how did they engage on campus and beyond? They'll each speak for a few minutes or so, and then we'll open up the forum to anyone who wants to speak. But first, let me introduce our panelists. First, we have Mana Hayakawa. Mana graduated from Oaks College in 2001 with a degree in American Studies. She earned her PhD in Culture and Performance at UCLA and a Master's of Education in Social Justice Education at UMass Amherst. Mana is currently a lecturer in Asian American Studies, Disability Studies, and Dance Studies. Second, we have Laura Collier-Chan. Laura graduated from Oaks College in 2001 with a degree in anthropology. She also received a master's in liberal studies and urban education at the City University of New York Graduate Center. She currently works at First 5 Alameda County and led an oral history project celebrating the Oakland Asian Branch Library for the Oakland Chinatown Oral History Project. Third, we have Yukiya Jerry Waki. Jerry graduated from Merrill College in 1999 with a degree in American Studies with an emphasis in expressive culture. He was involved with the PISA, JASA, KZSC, and the MLK Junior Convocation. Jerry now works as an advocate for re-envisioning nutrition programs in K-12 schools. He moonlights as a spoken word artist, published writer, and the creator and host of The Buffet Show, a podcast showcasing artists, community organizers, and educators that highlights their sacrifices and process. And then our final panelist is Kyo Tang Ishikawa. Kyo graduated from Merrill College in 2004 with a degree in business management, economics, and Asian American Studies before getting an MA in Asian American Studies and a master's in social welfare from UCLA. Kyo works as a social work supervisor and child welfare trainer for the County of San Mateo Children and Family Services. So we'll start with our first question. How did Judy and her courses affect your sense of self and community? And we'll start with Mana.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you all. Thank you all to the organizers. And it's really lovely to be in this virtual space with so many of you. I'm seeing so many familiar names. I think Jerry and I kind of talked about this when we're on an earlier panel, and that I'm kind of surprised to be here because, there's so many of us that took classes with Judy Young, and I know, my story is just one of so many, and I hope we get to hear some of those stories later on. I think I would say that I was one of the hundreds and thousands of students that took classes with Judy Young, and probably like many undergrads, didn't really fully appreciate, how much she was shaping my life, really just such a huge influence in my life. And I really didn't get to really reflect on that and see that until I actually started my own research, which I can talk about in kind of the second part of the question. But kind of addressing this, like, how did Judy Young, shape and affect my sense of self and community? She was literally the first person that introduced me to Asian American studies. I took my first Asian American studies history class as a 19-year-old, and embarrassingly, I was definitely one of those Asian American students that didn't know anything about, as myself and my history. And like Jerry, I'm second gen Nisei, Japanese American. And so some of us who are post 65 Japanese Americans, I think, have a harder time kind of figuring out who we are, because some of the kind of historical references are made about, third, fourth, fifth generation Japanese Americans. So, I was coming into UC Santa Cruz, needing to kind of figure out who I am in so many ways. And I think I was just lucky enough to have had the support of folks in this room, and, Nancy Kim, all my friends from Oaks, but also, landing in Judy Young's history class, my first quarter, my sophomore year. And again, just opened up a whole new world, just a new way of understanding, new language, new perspective, and, humanizing history, right? So humanizing history with the voices of the people, and really having this opportunity to share feelings with people of the past, which is really, I think, grounding and provided some roots for me as this kind of young learner. And I think feeling a part of something, both in the classroom and outside the classroom, just shaped my entire experience as an undergrad, which ultimately, kind of led me to do the work around Asian American women and performance history that I've been able to do since then. So I'll start with that, and I'll pass it on.
Laura, do you want to speak next? Laura, you're muted.
I got it. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thanks, Mona. Thanks, Alice. So great to be here. Actually, my experience with Judy started when I was pretty young, actually. My mom grew up in Chinatown, a couple years younger than Judy. And my parents were both involved in the Asian American movement. And they would drag us kids to community events every week, right? And so sometimes Judy would be there. And so my earliest memories, when you're a kid, it's like, oh yeah, she's like that librarian, she's that lady, something to do with Angel Island, so I knew of her, right? As a kid, but didn't really develop a relationship with her until I got to Santa Cruz. And I arrived in Santa Cruz at UC Santa Cruz in 2000, and I was a transfer student, and really kind of struggled my first quarter. It was very alienating for me at Santa Cruz. I was a transfer student, so I didn't have those bonds that first year students get. There weren't a lot of Asian students on campus. And, the campus felt disconnected from the community, right? It's up on this hill. And so it was just really hard to feel like you belong there for me. And then when I took Judy's class, it was really a breath of fresh air for me and really grounding for me, because, she was still Judy Young. She was still grounded in community. She was still so much like my mom and so many other Chinatown women I had grown up with, the clothes, the haircut, there's a Chinatown spunkiness from women of that generation, the way they talk, they're very firm, but joyful. And so I just immediately felt at home. But even more importantly, it was so great to see that she was still authentically herself, but still a force at the university, right? Like there's this pathway for me to feel like I don't have to compromise, right? And so that I could feel like I could belong there. And so that was really critical for me moving forward. And the other thing that from her class that I really appreciated is that she covered like the local Santa Cruz, Monterey Bay Chinese history. So really want to thank George Au, who spoke earlier, for his work on that. But, you know, being there in Santa Cruz, and like I said, like feeling like Asians were such a minority and not really seen in the community, but like feeling like I don't have blood ancestors there, but her giving me that space of like, you have like community ancestors there. And so like, we belong here just as much as anybody else. And so I really appreciated her like local history that she provided for us. So, you know, those are my strongest memories from Judy in terms of my time at Santa Cruz.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we'll hear from Jerry.
Thank you, Alice. Could you hear me? Again, I just want to express the sentiments of appreciation for allowing me to be part of this. I was a student of hers back in the late 90s. And so, you know, I think sense of self is something that is pretty significant, right? I mean, that whole idea of sense of self. And, you know, if you had one in college, congratulations. I did not have one, you know, not solid anyway. You know, my time as a student was, you know, a time of growth and learning in academics, and I could have done a lot better. And thank you for narrative evaluations. You know, college was about, you know, relationships and social skills, and definitely, you know, the start of this whole identity thing, right? And so I took, you know, one of Judy's oral history classes, like many of us did. And, you know, I thought it was going to be like another American Studies course. But what it did was it opened locked gates within me. And so, you know, I ended up interviewing my mother. And, you know, she didn't think her life was important. And I'll get a little, you know, I'll get to that a little bit later. But I ended up taking my Japanese instructor from Santa Cruz, Miss Fujita, and we drove down to Santa Maria, down to the Central Coast. And, you know, part of, you know, the technique that Judy would use is to really kind of, you want to make the person that you're interviewing comfortable, right? And so I took, you know, my mom immigrated from Japan back in the 70s, and her, you know, her first thing, she didn't speak a lick of English, even though, you know, she aced her DMV exam. I've never have, right? But it was the first time that I wanted her to feel comfortable in her native language, to express to me just stories of her childhood, and, you know, and how she met my dad, you know, by a photo. And so that kind of stuff really grew on me, and it was really astounding to hear. And so, you know, what Judy really taught me was, you know, your subjects or whoever you're going to be interviewing, you know, their life is important. I think it's pretty heavy to see or hear that, you know, when you ask somebody, you know, why would you even want to interview me? You know, I'm not that significant. I'm not that important. And, you know, I'm sure those sentiments can be felt by folks, a lot of folks, right? To feel invisible or not seen. And that is quite heavy, right? And what Judy and her life's work allowed me to see is that anyone who you decide to interview or to talk to and to communicate with and to learn about, their life is important. And she also taught me that history is not just about tragedy or struggle or just joy and celebration. History is the gray area, the mundane, the trivial, the what the heck just happened. History is active participation, and that's what I take away from the experience that I had with Judy. And I, we'll get into it a little bit later, but I still do it. Still do it. So thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Jerry. Now, our last panelist, Keo, do you want to talk about how Judy and her classes affected your sense of self and community?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Keo. I was apparently one of Judy's last students. She retired, I think, in my senior year, and she was also my senior thesis advisor. She helped me with, I wanted to do an independent studies major, and so she and actually Alice were on my committee so that I could pursue something that I was actually interested in addition to being a business major, because my family wanted me to do that. But I feel like what helped me with, when I think about Judy, I also think of that first class that I had with her. Judy was one of my first professors. So I was a freshman, 18 years old, coming from Hawaii, where I was a majority, and then coming to Santa Cruz, where I was very much not a majority, was culture shock to me. I felt homesick, I felt alone, and I just didn't know where I belonged. And I think Judy's class helped me to find that sense of belonging that actually Laura mentioned, because it helped me to realize that we could be the center of our own stories, right? And so there were classes about people who looked like me, people whose experiences were like the experiences of my great-grandparents, right, of my grandparents. And I thought that was really crucial in terms of like the formation of my identity. It allowed me to go beyond identifying myself as a Chinese, Japanese, Okinawan kid to an Asian American, right, or a student of color. And I think that is really helpful, because it also then allowed me to find commonality and community with people who are not just the same as me, right? Because I was able to then broaden my sense of identity and who I was. I also think, like, when I think of Judy, I also think of this oral history class that Jerry mentioned, right? Like it was a way of highlighting the voices of people who were unheard, right? And letting them speak for themselves rather than putting words into their mouth, right? And so I thought that was a great way for me to view the world, and it's a great skill that I've actually been able to carry on in my current profession as a social worker. And so I just really appreciate that that's a foundation that I had even before I even thought social work was an ideology, right? And then Judy, also, when I think about Judy and my sense of self, is that she was just an encouraging, compassionate person. As a freshman, she took the time to meet with me when I had questions. As a junior, she agreed to be on my committee, right? And as a senior, she allowed me to spend one-on-one time with her to work on my thesis. She encouraged me to go to grad school. She pushed me further than I wanted to push because I was done with school. But Judy was like, no, you're not done. You need to apply to UCLA because they have a good program. And I think of her as one of my role models because she is somebody who made me think of what to go beyond, right? And how do I think about myself in community? And also then to think about how I can serve the community that I'm doing, that I'm working with. Because when I think about how she talked about Angel Island or like the Chinese American community, is like, I want to be like that. I want to be able to know my history. I want to be able to tell other people about my history. And so I also, sorry, I feel like I'm rambling, but I also really, one of the things I really appreciated about Judy was there was this alumni group that we had soon after she passed. And it was just so touching to hear person after person tell how she touched their life lives and how she advocated for Asian American studies and how she basically was a beacon of really change in Santa Cruz for students that look like me, right? For students that look like the majority of the people here. And that was something that helped us to have like the Asian American Pacific Islander Resource Center. And that's what helped to encourage other students to pursue a life of activism. So I'm just so grateful for Judy and just opening my eyes to things that are beyond myself.
Thank you, Keo. So that was not rambling at all. In fact, it provides a great transition to the second question that our panelists are going to discuss, which is, how did Judy affect how you engage on campus and beyond? So we'll start with Mana again.
All right, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the beyond piece. I think as a student that was pretty involved as an undergrad, like I said earlier, kind of leaving Santa Cruz, I really again got to be reintroduced, reacquainted with Judy's scholarship in a way that has been incredibly meaningful. So after UC Santa Cruz, I kind of was in the education world, higher ed, student affairs world, and I kind of kept up my practice as a dancer. And I never thought my social justice kind of oriented work and my practice as a dancer would ever meet until I started working with a choreographer named Claudine Naganuma. I see Nancy Hom here, so this is actually really lovely. There are Asian American choreographers in the Bay that are doing this interesting work around, incorporating personal narratives and history into choreographic technique and these very multidisciplinary projects. And so after working with Claudine and learning about these choreographers, I kind of took the leap and went back to graduate school at UCLA. And working under Lucy Burns and Valerie Matsumoto, it was very quick that if I was going to research Asian American women in performance, that I was going to have to do the work by revisiting Judy Young's work. So it was, again, just this reminder that Judy Young created this field for us, and so I'm kind of looking at this very tiny sliver, Asian American women performers, dancers specifically, early 1900s to the 1950s, and you can't do that work without Judy Young. And I think being in the archives, what I really appreciated is that, what's in the archives is not just there, it's put there, right, by institutions, by, folks that have power often. And what Judy did was create a new archive, right, with the oral histories, with the narratives, and also what she did because of her kindness, because of her generosity, because of the way that she was able to build trust with the women that she's interviewing. People were generous back. They shared personal letters, personal photos, personal news clippings. And so again, it was because of her particular approach to oral history, to the archives, that we have this incredible amount of knowledge. And from her, we, get to build, right? So when I wrote about the Chinese American dancers in the Chinatown nightclubs of the 1930s to 1970s, there's there's a documentary on the work that on that, but again, who had the oral histories? It was Judy Young. And kind of to wrap it up, I recently got to teach an Asian American Studies class. I did a theories and methods class at the Claremont Colleges, and again, I taught a piece, a chapter in Judy's book, because I got to do Asian American history, Chinese American women's history, oral history methodology, and archival research skills, all through her. And it was just this incredible experience to then see another generation learn from Judy, but then also bring back more knowledge into the archive as they also concluded, because their project was to do their own oral histories. So, I'm so grateful, and I only wish I was able to really fully articulate this appreciation, while in the times that we had together. But her legacy is very much alive.
Thank you, Mana. Laura?
Thanks, Mana. So I didn't go into any professional work around like Asian American history or the Asian American community in terms of like my profession, but I've taken on like more volunteer projects that kind of carried on a lot of what Judy, taught us, and a lot of her legacy. And I volunteered with the Association of Chinese Teachers in San Francisco, and with my mom, Irene Dia Collier, we did like workshops, and then also eventually like my mom and I and another UC Santa Cruz alum, Jeannie Macbeth, who was Judy's TA, we also made a book together. We did an API biographies book for fourth grade teachers. And so it was really great for us to carry on, what we learned. Jeannie and I both learned from Judy, about, uncovering people's stories and making them available, in this case, to like elementary school teachers. And then I had the really wonderful opportunity in 2015 to lead an oral history project on the Asian Branch Library, which Judy was the founding librarian. And so I got to do an oral history on Judy. So it was a reverse role, which is very nerve-wracking to have to prepare for that. But it was such an incredible experience, learning from her this period very early in her career and what she had built with this library. It was from scratch. Nobody had ever, it was 1975, Asian American as a term had just been like born essentially. And so she had to create this from scratch. There was no model to build a library for 5 communities. It was the Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Filipino, and Vietnamese communities. And she had to build a collection. She had to hire staff from all those communities. She eventually amassed like over 30,000 materials in multiple languages, and Asian American materials too, film strips and poetry and all sorts of materials. But she also had a lot of community events, and she was bringing in Asian American musicians and dancers, and really created this space for Asian Americans and Asian immigrants throughout the East Bay. And even she said people would drive from Sacramento to come to the library because they couldn't find these materials anywhere else in the 70s, right? And my husband actually lived in that neighborhood. And my mother-in-law, who worked in the sewing factories in San Francisco, just still has just like such joyful memories of Judy at that library, and just being really kind and always helpful and willing to talk to her. That this library became like a safe space of belonging for so many members of the community that was pretty dispersed throughout the East Bay, that they would all come to this library. And so I just really appreciate all the work that she did there, and learning from her and talking to people who worked with her back then. And the whole experience just really showed me how much her work in the community, was connected to her work later on. Like she still constantly kept the community at the center. When she would go to, when she did stories and interviewed people, she always brought it back to them. She really wanted to take care of the people that she interviewed. And for that, the community itself really trusted her. And my husband's cousins at one point had found a chest of materials from their grandmother's belongings. She had passed away, and when they got them translated, had realized that they didn't know that she had been detained at Angel Island and had lost a child at Angel Island, actually. And her name was Sotoshi. And what do you do when you find this out about your family? Like, they took it to Judy, because they knew that they could trust her. They knew that she would take care of that memory and the research, and that she would see this person as a real whole person that you need to cherish as a story and really respect, and so I just really appreciate my time that I spent with Judy and her legacy, and just really will miss how special she was.
Thank you, Laura. Jerry?
It's hard to kind of toot my own horn. It's like, it's one of those things where it's hard, but I think what Judy offered to us is that, what, you should toot your own horn. You should. And whatever you have gone through and struggled through and, come out of, and you've made it thus far, celebrate that, right? And that's my takeaway. Like after graduating Santa Cruz, I ended up doing all kinds of different things. I ended up doing a podcast. I worked at a cemetery. I mean, it's like, what am I doing things right? I don't know. I'm still around, right? But that experience and surviving all of that is something of value. And surviving all of that and having your life as a commodity, as something that's of worth, is something that I take wholeheartedly, and it's got me to where I was able to drive Yuri Kochiyama to an event, over the Bay Bridge. And, I ended up making a podcast because of Al Robles and his experience, which is called the buffet, not the buffet. It's the buffet because, his experience and his life story, which I tried to probe and learn from, was because of his experience working with the Japanese community as he was, growing up and doing his thing in Japantown and Manila Town here in San Francisco. Me doing events with Jenny Lim, Francis Wong, name dropping. I saw all these folks on this participant list. I'm like, I know you all, a lot of them. And I want you to know also that I'm appreciative of the folks who help me grow. It's not all the time that we get to actually meet each other and hang out, but what Judy and the likes have taught me is that it goes by pretty fast, right? And regardless of we connect once in a while or all the time, and the fact that we may see each other in the peripherals, that a lot of the work that Judy and all y'all have done has inspired me considerably. And I'm appreciative of that. And just to be able to share my thoughts is something that I will never forget, because five of us or four of us in a room of over 250, and I'm blessed and accept that privilege of honoring Judy as long as I'm still around.
Thank you, Jerry. Finally, Keo.
So like Laura, I'm not actually in the Asian American Studies field anymore, but it was something that I really did consider thanks to Judy and her encouragement / insistence that I go to grad school. So for a few years, I was at UCLA studying Asian American Studies. I wanted to be an Asian American historian or an Asian American activist, one of those two things, right? I was like, this is what I need to do. I need to either learn more about my history or give back to my community. And I think a lot of that has to do with the framework and the foundation that I had here at Santa Cruz. And Judy was a huge part of what that was. I felt like the importance of uplifting people's voices and hearing what they had to say, the importance of every voice, right? And like that we had the right to speak is an important part of what oral history is and how Judy taught us. And also just I mean, Judy was also really good at like giving credit to everyone, even when I feel like we didn't do anything. And I say that because I remember, actually I pulled it out. Judy sent me a copy of her book and she signed it saying, "Thank you for helping me with research." And I was like, I may have like gone to the UCLA library like 2 or 3 times for you. Like I do not deserve to be in it, but she was just so generous in terms of like what she wanted to do and how she wanted to make sure that the community was credited. And I just really appreciate Judy for that sense of I don't know, that value that she had for just giving back, right? For being transparent about all of her communications and for really acknowledging the people who helped to get her there. And I feel like even though I ended up not actually going back into academia once I started my social work program, I do think that the social work program that I was in was actually a joint program with Asian American Studies at UCLA. And so I was able to intern in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles, right? I was able to see how we could advocate for our communities. And again, the value for wanting to hear other people's voices, right? To let them tell their stories and them looking at them for kind of what is the next direction to go next, I think is an important value for community organizing, for social work, actually for like just talking to anyone. And I feel like that's something that Judy instilled in me. And I know it's not just Judy, but I feel like it's a huge part of what Judy has taught me, right? And so like it gets conflated with like the things that other people have taught me as well. But I feel like, again, like being able to hear from other people has reinforced like this is from Judy. Like Judy was this person who cared and who wanted to make sure that even people who didn't think that they deserved a voice got one. And so I just appreciate, I just appreciate being here, and I appreciate her. And I hope, I did say, I think in that alumni group a few months ago that I think that my one regret is not being able to thank her for all the things, right? Like as a student, I feel like I should have been more appreciative of my professors, of my teachers. And so actually, even after Judy passed, I emailed Alice and Valerie Matsumoto, who are some of my other mentors, and just how much I appreciated them, because I think it's important for us to do that. And again, to give credit, right, for the people who have made us who we are. And so I just want to thank you, Alice, as well, and thank Judy for just this opportunity to talk about her and to just to honor just the legacy that she's given all of us.
Thank you, Keo. You know what? I don't know if you know this, but after you graduated, Judy and I talked about how you crafted that Asian American Studies major. And in fact, right, it even made her more determined to try to create an actual major rather than having students do it as an independent study. And I know that she would be very moved to have heard all your comments, and also to have known that she played a role in supporting you at a time when there weren't a lot of Asian American or Pacific Islander students on campus. I mean, basically at this point, I believe, maybe Jasmine will be able to correct me, I think we have close to 4,000 students of Asian ancestry on campus. And some of those are international students. Some of those are students who were born in the United States. Some are students that immigrated right recently. And we have a huge range of students and a lot of clubs and organizations that really are the result of the passionate advocacy that Judy gave to this university. I mean, when I said she was a tireless advocate of AAPI studies, she really was. And that extended to encouraging new faculty like myself. When I first came onto this campus, Judy went to my talk. She took me out to lunch. She had me over to her house. And she, and I was intimidated because here is this famous pioneer of oral history and Asian American studies, and she's inviting me to her home for a meal. And while there, she starts cooking for me and telling me, there are not a lot of AAPI faculty or staff on campus. And in fact, there were very few outside of the STEM fields. But she said, but we have to stick together. And there is a way that you can enjoy this campus. You can enjoy working not only with the AAPI students, but also with the other students of color and the non-AAPI students who will take our classes, because we have this obligation to give them an education about why Asian American studies is important to them, regardless of their racial or ethnic background. And for many years, she would talk about how she continued to correspond with her former students, through emails, through letters. I don't think she was really on social media, but she was not someone who taught a class and then said goodbye to you, right? She wanted students to see themselves forging a relationship with her. And that was an amazing model for me as a new faculty member, as well as her role in speaking and supporting at community events, right? Whether it was, watching students with the PCC doing their dances, going to a pizza, hosting dinners. I mean, this was not a part-time job for Judy. It was all consuming, and supporting students, supporting people in the community, as Laura mentioned, right? The relationship she had within the community, she didn't see that as work. She saw that as part of her social justice commitment. And I am incredibly grateful for how she provided me with a role model for how to treat students and how to be a participant within the community, both on campus and outside of campus. So we have 10 minutes left, and we want to open it up to members of the audience. I know there have been some incredibly insightful and moving comments in the chat, and we're going to try to collate them and include them so that if you haven't had a chance to look at them, you can see them. But if you want to say what you mentioned in the chat, or you want to add a comment, please raise your hand, and we'd love to hear your comments. Or we can open it up to our panelists to add more comments too. Kaz, are you going to moderate, or should we just go to Trinity and then Casey? I see their hands are raised. Why don't we start with Trinity?
Thank you. Thank you. I was a student at UC Santa Cruz back in the 70s, and there were about 200 Asians, including international students, on the whole campus. 200, and maybe 12 Filipinos, including the groundskeepers. I mean, there was nothing there. And I only bring this up because I used to speak in Judy's class when she was at Berkeley in graduate school about Asian lesbians. And so she encouraged me to go to graduate school, and I was doing a project, and we had breakfast over at my house, and she said, "Why are you not doing anything on Asian lesbians?" I said, "Listen, there's too much homophobia out there. I won't get a job." And so she said, "You have to study something that you love so much that even when you hate doing it, you'll still do it." So I said, "Okay, you're right." So I completely switched projects, completely turned around on that one comment. And I just wanted to share that because it was groundbreaking for me and also my community organizing. And then the last thing I just wanted to share is that when Unbound Feet came out, there was a community Chinatown banquet, and there was like 500 families of the people who she interviewed. I don't know who and how that happened, but they were so grateful. I just can't even compare. There's no words that can convey their sense of acknowledgement. And so this woman not only was a pillar of the community, but she laid at least 3 bricks in the corner foundations of our movement and in Asian American studies. And I'm really glad that you did this event, because with COVID, we couldn't speak, but now you could. So thank you.
Thank you, Trinity. And you are a very important scholar in this field. As Mana's nodding, we all know you. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, our next participant is Casey.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I'm actually working at Angel Island State Park right now. And so I'm just wanted to say on behalf of California State Parks and Angel Island State Park, what an amazing person Judy has been to what we do every day. And, you know, many people have already said, like, we couldn't have gotten where we were without her. And I don't know if that is more true than here on Angel Island itself. So I've worked here for 21 years, and that is when, you know, I had the opportunity to get to know Judy through her books and research and contributions that she's made to the park. She was always so helpful in helping train our staff and volunteers, and with every little question that I had that came up, I was like, can I clarify this? Can we make sure this is right? You know, she was always there to help us make sure that what the permanent panels on the site were accurate, and just a boundless resource when it comes to Angel Island's history. Personally, I am also a banana slug, and so I was one of those future students that benefited from those classes that she helped develop. And so I am also very grateful to her for introducing me to these stories before I started working on Angel Island, and for all of the work that she did to get us where we are now. We do have some new exhibit spaces opening. We hope to, in the future, create an exhibit that will help acknowledge some of the people that helped save the barracks, the detention barracks at the immigration station, and subsequently basically every building on Angel Island from being removed for recreation and other things that state parks had in mind in the early days of the park. And obviously there's a huge shift now at this site because of the work of the community to save this place and make sure these stories are told and continue to be told to each new generation. So in that future exhibit, we're already talking about how Judy will be included in that storytelling, as well as others that have made such huge contributions and made this place possible for people to visit. So I want to also, if he was still here, Ben Finkel would be here remembering her too.
Thank you, Casey. And if for anyone who joined us later, the entire program is being recorded and will be accessible after the program on the Critical Race and Ethnic Studies Department website here at UCSC. Okay, we have Nancy.
Oh, hi. Thank you for doing this. I knew Judy Young when I was part of Kearney Street Workshop back in the mid 1970s, and everything the younger students or former students have said was true for us back then, because we were in our early 20s, just out of school, and Judy was a guiding light back then. She helped us when we mounted our first show at Angel Island, about Angel Island in 1976, to call attention to what used to be, it was before the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation had its name. And my personal connection with her was when we designed the exhibit Chinese Woman of America and published the book in connection with that of the same name. And I was about 7 or 8 months pregnant when we started the project. And this is typical of Judy. She would drive me around. She was so detailed that we angst over every single person. And I have many, many folders that, you talked about folders. I'm still using some of those folders that she had, but she presided over every design, every sketch, everything. So I had admired her for her detail, but I also admired her because she seemed to be everywhere at once, with boundless energy, and never forgot Kearney Street Workshop, from those first times to all the time she was at Santa Cruz. She checked back in with us frequently. And the last time I saw her was not that long ago. It was pre-pandemic, where she handed me a box of chocolates, always looking out for people. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Nancy. Ronald?
Hi, everyone. It's good to see so many of you. I wanted to actually read, it's interesting, hearing about how Judy encouraged people to collect histories, because in my sophomore year, I actually completed my my first major, which was anthropology, and I did an oral history project. And so I wanted to share this passage, which is just a snapshot in time, and it's from Judy, because I interviewed her. Quote, "I grew up always with this idea and said that American meant white American, not me, not those of us who are not white Anglo-American. America represents certain ideas, certainly in Protestantism, certainly our economic system, our sense of competition, economically and socially. America represents American apple pie with ice cream, with the lifestyle, the culture, the dominant culture. I'm very aware of that. Not that I could express this when I was growing up, but when I knew that, when I heard the word American, it didn't include me. I was not American. I was Chinese American, or I was Chinese, but I didn't see myself in television and film. When they say that's American, it's usually white American. So that's what went in my mind for a long time. I think now there's a movement to this period where the demographics are changing, and certainly our population is becoming less white, particularly in California. I'm learning that we can claim to be American, that we are American. I am born here, and there are certainly many others who are not white, who can say that they're American because they have been born here and raised here and lived here. They have adopted a certain outlook, as well as certain lifestyles that I know is distinctive from other parts of the world. So now I think of American as more multicultural, end quote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. So we have an academic forum that's supposed to start at 4:20. So if you want to take a break, feel free to do so. But I'd love to hear from Elizabeth and Joe Chan, and then Daphne. But if you have to leave, feel free to do so.
Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to remember Judy Young. Liz and I have been docents at the U.S. Immigration Station on Angel Island, and that's where we first met Judy. And she knew that we had researched our own families at the National Archives in San Bruno. So she asked us to help her with her research on her upcoming book on Angel Island. So Liz and I went out there several days and went through 400 records of German people who had touched the shores of Angel Island over the many years that the Angel Island was open. Unfortunately, our research didn't make the cut for her book, but let me tell you, her book, Angel Island, co-authored with Erica G., is our Bible and is the gold standard for any of us who are connected with Angel Island and its activities. So we want to thank her and Erica for the wonderful book.
Thank you, Joe. And our final speaker, Daphne.
Thank you so much. I'm Daphne Kwok, and I had the great honor of actually working for Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation, and that's when I had a chance to meet and work with Judy. And as Casey said, and it's so good to see Liz and Joe as well, and all the others connected with Angel Island. I'm from DC. I'm calling in from DC, and when I moved to San Francisco to work for Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation, I really have to thank Judy. She was just so warm and welcoming to bring an East Coaster to the West Coast. I had never lived in West Coast before. For me to be able to soak in all of Chinese American history is the reason why I wanted to go out to San Francisco. And I'm so jealous of the students that just spoke, the alumni they spoke, because unfortunately, my university did not have an Asian American studies. And I have always said, my whole career has been in the Asian American community, in the civil rights, political arena. And I've always said to people, it's like, I want to go back for Asian American studies. And to have had you guys all to have had Judy as a professor, I'm so jealous. And for those that have Alice and the other professors that are on this, I'm truly, truly jealous. And I think, but as you said, she's just so warm and welcoming, so gentle. And I have to say, when I always smile when I think about her and getting married to Eddie, I was like, they were the cutest couples. And I remembered when they were doing their book tour, they were just so adorable. And I loved her book about Eddie Fung. And she was very, very special. So kudos to all of you here for remembering her. And I'm just so excited to hear what Casey said, that she will be recognized and honored at the Angel Island Immigration Station, as rightly she should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne. Well, so we have a minute before the academic forum is going to start, but I guess one thing I will say too is after Judy retired, she continued to live in Santa Cruz for many years with Eddie. And she once told me, we had a celebratory, well, from my point of view, it was a very sad dinner, a sad farewell dinner before she moved back to San Francisco. And I asked her why she hadn't moved back earlier. And she told me that Eddie loved Santa Cruz. And the two of them came to a class that I co-teach with Alan Christie called Memories of the Pacific War. And each year that we taught it, they would come, they would talk about their book. They would inspire students to do oral history. And the students always loved the story about how Judy didn't realize that Eddie was interested in her romantically until she was listening to the oral history she had done with him. And while transcribing the interview, she realized that Eddie was hitting on her. And so the next time she saw him, she asked him, Eddie, are you hitting on me? And Eddie said, yes. And so we told the students, normally you don't expect to, have a romantic outcome with people that you're interviewing for a scholarly book, but this was the perfect example of how, Eddie was an incredible person and how the two of them, both of them individually incredible, became this amazing force together that inspired students. They always got a standing ovation. It was a real loss for me and Alan and our students when Eddie passed away, and when Judy, who continued to give talks, she would come to my Asian American history course and give talks. She would continue to advise students. But after Eddie passed away, I think she felt the need to go home and be with her family. So, Okay, I think we're supposed to start the academic forum now. So if you're returning after a short break, welcome back. This academic forum is going to be led by UCSC Emerita Professor of Literature, Karen Tay Yamashita. The author of 10 books, Karen is quite famous and has received many, many awards, including an American Book Award for her book Through the Arc of the Rainforest, and a California Book Award for her novel, I, Hotel, which also was a finalist for the National Book Award. I, Hotel also won the American Book Award, the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association Award, and the Association for Asian American Studies Book Award. Her latest book, Sansei and Sensibility, is a collection of short stories about growing up and living in Japanese America. And on November 17th, Karen will receive the 2021 Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters from the National Book Foundation, presenter of the National Book Awards. Karen Tay Yamashita.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Alice. This has really been really lovely to hear everyone's memories of Judy. I'm so moved. It's very moving. Okay, let me begin this. Okay, so I'm very honored today to honor the memory of my dear friend and colleague, Professor Judy Young. I want to say that when I arrived to teach at UC Santa Cruz in 1997, Judy immediately welcomed me. And she had created within the American Studies Department a track for Asian American Studies, offering Asian American history courses, and she invited me to participate in an interdisciplinary project. And I recall that a handful of professors who gathered to support this program. There were among us Deborah Wu in community studies, Alice Yang in history, Nancy Chen in anthropology, and there are others. And if I missed you, please give us a shout out. But we were a very, very small group, and Judy was our guiding leader and our mentor. From my perspective as a writer, Judy taught history through literature. And so I'll give you one example. She introduced me to the author Fei Mei Yang, and you must remember Fei's beautiful book, Bone, about a family in San Francisco, Chinatown. And I remember gathering a group of Asian American students and taking them to Chinatown to join Judy for her famous tour of Chinatown. And we were revisiting it through the storytelling of the book Bone and other books. And the tour included, I remember this, a fortune cookie factory. And of course, it ended with a meal at a local Chinese restaurant. So today we've gathered here three very distinguished professors to speak about Judy's teaching and scholarship and her significant contributions to the field of history and Asian American studies. Our first guest is Professor Gordon H. Zhang. Gordon H. Zhang is a professor of history at Stanford University and the Olive H. Palmer Professor of Humanities. He currently serves as the Senior Associate Vice President for Undergraduate Education and is the Stanford Alumni Association Fellow in Undergraduate Education. And he is the former director of the Center for East Asian Studies. He's been at Stanford since 1991. In 2019, he published Ghosts of Gold Mountain, the epic history of the Chinese who built the Transcontinental, and co-edited The Chinese and the Iron Road, Building the Transcontinental. These books draw from over 7 years of research conducted by the Chinese Railroad Workers in North America project at Stanford, which he has co-directed. The other books include Friends and Enemies, the United States, China, and the Soviet Union, 1948 to 1972, Morning Glory, Evening Shadow, Yamato Ichihashi and his interment writings, 1942 to 1945, and the book Fateful Ties, A History of America's Preoccupation with China. He teaches in American history, Trans-Pacific history, and US-China relations and Asian American history. Please welcome Professor Zhang.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Karen, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Great to see you after many years. Good to see Alice and many other friends, colleagues, old activists. I would say former activists. Now we're in our senior years. That's what I mean to sort of say, I guess, and colleagues and relatives. So it's great to be invited. I'm honored to be included in this tribute to our good friend and teacher and colleague, Judy. Now, I'm going to just add one comment to Karen's very nice introduction to me. There was one book that she left out.
Oh.
And that was the book I co-edited with Judy.
Oh, you didn't put that in your bio. Come on.
Oh, I was my mistake then. I don't know. Yeah. And so I'm very honored to have worked with Judy on that book. I'll get to that in a moment. Now I can speak to about, it's very moving me to hear from you all who've spoken already about your association with Judy, and you know her in many different capacities. I had the privilege of knowing Judy, perhaps maybe there were others here, maybe Nancy or Trinity, who we all knew her around the same time. This was in the early mid-70s in San Francisco, Chinatown. I had dropped out of graduate school. I was active in San Francisco radical politics, and including the anti-war movement. And that's where I first met Judy. She was an organizer and one of the leaders of a group that was called the Bay Area Asian Coalition Against the War. And it was a principal organization at the time that participated in the big demonstrations in San Francisco, all around the Bay Area. And we had sort of our Asian contingent, and was organized under Bacall. And so I was curious about her because the others involved in that coalition were other sort of radicals. And here was Judy, a couple of years older, not much older, but a few years older than us, or a librarian of all things, not someone who wore jeans and pea coats and that stuff you get from the Army surplus store and all that kind of stuff that we were. So she was a very respectable librarian, but she was as adamant and as outraged and as determined as the rest of us. And she was active in supporting other causes for social justice, International Hotel, and the whole Kearny Street block. And then she was involved with East West newspaper and all sorts of things. So I say this in part because there was a real core of Judy, and I'm not sure, I never got a chance to understand how her own political evolution, but all of a sudden she sort of came onto the scene and she had those political values. And they remained with her throughout her whole life. So I have the privilege, I guess, of knowing her over a long period of time, but not as intensely at different moments as many of you did. Now, at the time I actually did work with her with some depth is in the 1990s. I mean, I knew her a little bit when she was going to graduate school, and I found it kind of curious. I returned to graduate schools in the 1980s too. She went to graduate school. I thought it was curious that here she was. She'd been in San Francisco's Chinatown Library, Oakland, China, and all this. And now at her successful career, she decided to go to graduate school and get a PhD. So I think it has to be noted because that's really quite unusual. And her career trajectory was really unusual. I really don't know, maybe one or two others that I know in the historical profession who had something of a similar trajectory. But she had that courage. She had that drive and ambition. And I think that's really important to also think about Judy. She was, despite her sort of quiet demeanor, her humility, her gentleness, she had a backbone of steel. She was tough, but she never displayed it. She never threatened it. I mean, but she was determined, and I saw that very early on. I saw that in the 80s when she was working on her dissertation. I also knew her then a little bit because As with some of you, she consulted about getting interviews with people, and my family was connected to all sorts of people she was interested in. So I helped her get interviews with like Alice Fong Yu, my aunt, and people who worked at the Forbidden City nightclub and all this type of stuff. And so she had a voracious appetite and curiosity to be all sorts of people. But then in the 1990s, we had the closest collaboration. I always remember the work that we did, Judy and I and him, Mark Lai, collaborated on producing eventually Chinese American Voices. I had proposed the idea to her originally, and I said, look, Judy, we have all sorts of projects we've been involved with, but we have all sorts of research material that don't wind up in our books, including a lot of primary material. And so how about something this anthology, which came out of Chinese American Voices? So she said, how about bringing him, Mark, into this? Okay. So I knew him, Mark, a little bit. So we did this, and Judy was remarkable, even though I had some family health serious issues at the time, so I had to take a step back. And Judy immediately stepped up. I mean, I know she had a full plate, but she was so generous for her time that she took care of the project, and much of the final project really product is really her doing. But what I really appreciated was her savviness. Was that, him, Mark, was a wonderful, lovely person, and I miss him and Judy every day. But Mark was not always the easiest to get along with. He had his own quirks. He would forget things. He didn't know where things was. We went over to his house. It was like going into, can't even describe to you what it was, going into a cave of archive. It's papers everywhere, and stuff everywhere. It was really the home of I don't know where they slept. She and Laura, and so. We worked together, and she was so good with him, Mark, of getting materials from him and reminding him of things that he had forgotten about. And so she was a really good entrepreneur in that sense of helping to put together that project. I just want to conclude, because I really want to hear from others here, is that I'd say that she was really a singular scholar academic, and it's absolutely appropriate to call her a community historian, and she wasn't. But I would also say that she was just a great historian, period. And that's because there are some who consider, well, a community historian, that's sort of one type of historian. Then there's the scholarly academic historian. And she never really had envy of that or aspirations to do that. She was never cowed by people who put on a hat of being an academic, scholarly historian, all that business, because she was rock solid in her identification of how she could contribute and what was important, as so many of you have identified. And she dedicated herself with like a laser, as I said, to that cause. And she's done it better than anybody else that I know. Now, at the same time, she was absolutely faithful to the requirements of academic history. And her books, her record of work speak to multiple audiences, the public audience, community activists, but also to others who will gain from her scholarship. And she had that rigor. Now, I'll just end by, someone mentioned about her archive. And now she will live on through her work, but also through her archive. Now, her archive has been given to Stanford University Special Collections by her nieces. Her three nieces just finished signing the deed of gift 2 weeks ago. I got a record about that because I work with the library and collecting these archives, and I was told there were 46 boxes of her material. I said, 40, 40, they haven't been archived yet. They haven't been organized. They're not available yet. They're not even online in the search. 46 manuscript boxes, the usual archival books is 4 inches by 12 inches or so. No, 46 bankers boxes. Those huge boxes, 25 inches by 14 inches by, this type of those big things. And they contain, and here's the very general description, Chinese Women of America Project, interviews, including audio tapes, archival research, and photographs. Eddie Fung Project, interviews, audio tapes, archival research. Angel Island Project, interviews, including audio tapes and archival research. Chinese Women in San Francisco Project, interviews, including audio tapes, archival research, and photographs. There are literally several hundred tapes, audio tapes of the interviews she conducted. Can you imagine that audio archive? So salute, Judy. You'll live on long into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So our next guest is my great friend, Professor Bettina Apteker. Bettina Apteker is Distinguished Professor Emerita of Feminist Studies at UC Santa Cruz. She began teaching at UCSC in 1980 in Women's Studies and helped to build that program into a department and a graduate program. In 2004, Women's Studies became Feminist Studies. She is the author of several books, including The Morning Breaks, The Trial of Angela Davis, and a memoir, Intimate Politics. Currently, she is writing Communists in Closets, Querying the History, 1930s to 1990s. Bettina served as co-chair of the UC Presidential Chair in Feminist Critical Race and Ethnic Studies, and we collaborated on that. And those were some of the best years of my life at UC Santa Cruz. And she also held the Baskin Foundation Presidential Chair for Feminist Studies. Through UC Santa Cruz online programming, she has filmed her course, Feminism and Social Justice, and launched in 2019. And it's now been viewed by more than 80,000 students in the global community. Please welcome Bettina.
Thank you so much, Karen Tay. And I wanted to thank everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. I wanted to thank everybody. This program has been incredible, very, very moving, and very informative, and such a beautiful tribute to Judy and to the tremendous, it's like she moved a mountain in building Asian American studies and Chinese women's history in San Francisco and so on. Just an extraordinary legacy. So I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in honoring Judy Young. And I wanted to extend my condolences. It's been a year, but I wanted to extend my condolences to all of you, and especially to Judy's family. Judy came to UCSC in the 1990s, in 1990, and was in American Studies, as others have said. Our offices at the time were at Kresge College, and we saw each other very frequently. I sought her out, too, because we shared so many students in our classes, and they talked about her to me with so much love and appreciation. She was so patient, unassuming, forthright, clear, funny, and had such an encircling warmth. She was a brilliant scholar. In our many conversations, some of them over meals, and very often in what used to be informal, we used to call it the steno pool at Kresge College. It's really academic services is what it is. But in those days, it was called the steno pool. And we used to meet in there, because it's the watering hole, and you just went to get something Xeroxed or whatever. And I would have questions about Chinese American history, Chinese women's history, and she taught me so much. She was always very generous with her time, and I would ask her questions, or she would just volunteer something, and I was always running around trying to find a piece of paper where I could write down what she was telling me. She also shared poems with me from Angel Island that she had translated. I knew this was a very personal project for her because her father had been detained there. At the time, in the early 1990s, it was only available in a self-published volume that she did, as been mentioned before, with Mark Lai and Jenny Lin. Incarcerated for months, the poems carved into the walls, mostly by young men who were 14 to 18 years old, with little formal education. And one of them was this. It was called Random Thoughts, Deep at Night. It was written by Yi of Toshan. And he wrote, that she translated, "In the quiet of the night, I heard faintly the whistling of wind. The forms and shadows saddened me, upon seeing the landscape. The floating clouds, the fog darken the sky. The moon shines faintly. Grief and bitterness entwined are heaven sent. The sad person sits alone, leaning by a window. Judy's heart was open to this suffering and to all the suffering in the world, really of all peoples. And it was a heart that was also filled with great love and was inevitably a reservoir of compassion. In the mid-1990s, the UC Regents proposed to end affirmative action in UC admissions and to, quote, eliminate race and gender, close quote, preferences. This preceded the passage of Proposition 209 in California in 1996 that abolished affirmative action. Although the wording of the proposition was completely deceptive, making it sound like a pro-civil rights law to end discrimination based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin. The kicker, however, was this phrase embedded in this proposition that said, or grant preferential treatment to persons based on race and sex and so on. Thus, they completely misrepresented what affirmative action was and what it was trying to do, while appearing to support civil rights, and the Regents had done exactly the same thing. Judy and I were both members of the Academic Senate Committee on Affirmative Action, and one of us chaired it one year, and then the other one of us chaired it the other year, and I don't remember the sequence anymore. And we worked in tandem, and we launched a campaign to save affirmative action in UC admissions. We organized public meetings, including a very large teach-in that was held at the Stevenson Event Center, attended by hundreds of students, and I think many faculty. Among our speakers was Marcy Greenwood, who was then the newly minted UCS chancellor, and Marty Wormhout, who had been a mayor of Santa Cruz and at that time was a member of the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors. I wanted Judy to speak too, but she was very shy about that in such a large crowd. What I remember was seeing her seated in the front row, glowing, her face glowing with pleasure. Afterwards, we co-edited an anthology. It was called UCSC Affirmative Action Reader, and it was published in 1999. And we continued campaigning and educating and doing the best we could to reinstate affirmative action. Judy was passionate about it, and she knew exactly what would happen in terms of the decline of enrollment for students of color and funding for Asian American students and ethnic studies and so forth that she was helping to build. And it had many unfortunate results, as we know. There are studies that are going on now that are pointing out what the effects of this were. Nevertheless, Judy persevered, which I admired greatly, and invented and reinvented what we could do to circumvent, alleviate, and counter the race and gender discrimination, and always with a good deal of glee when successful. She had a wonderful sense of humor, and when we managed something, she would just come bounding in and say, "We did it!" She had a beautiful smile. When her book, Unbound Voices, was published, it's an extraordinary documentary history of Chinese women in San Francisco, she gave me a copy in which she had inscribed this beautiful Chinese proverb. Beside a well, one does not thirst. Beside sisters, one does not despair. I wept when I read it, and she hugged me. This inscription is given back now to Judy, with infinite gratitude for all of the gifts she shared and for her beautiful and inspired life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bettina. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce our guest, Professor Erica Lee. Erica Lee is a Regents Professor of History and Asian American Studies and Director of the Immigration History Research Center at the University of Minnesota. And she is President-elect of the Organization of American Historians. She is the author of 4 award-winning books, including America for Americans, A History of Xenophobia in America, The Making of Asian America, and Angel Island, Immigrant Gateway to America, co-written with Judy Young. Published in partnership with the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation to honor the centennial of the Angel Island Immigration Station in 2010, the book Angel Island received many awards and honors. It received the Kofi Western History Prize for the best book in Western history from the Western History Association, the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature in Adult Nonfiction from the American Library Association, and the honorable mention for the History Book Award from the Association of Asian American Studies. Angel Island was also named a best book by the San Francisco Chronicle and a Choice Outstanding Academic Title. Please welcome Professor Erica Lee.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for organizing this really wonderful tribute and memorial service. I wish that we could all be together, but it's wonderful to see people's Zoom faces and to join together in these amazing memories. I'm really honored to be here. I was so fortunate to work with Judy on many different occasions. She was really one of my first teachers before I even knew her through her books. Long before I had even really knew what Angel Island was, her book Island, written with him, Mark and Jenny, occupied a really cherished place on our family bookshelves. I was then fortunate to work with Judy in many other roles as a student. I was getting my degree in history at UC Berkeley, and she was teaching at UC Santa Cruz. And she generously responded to my many emails as I was engaging in research in the National Archives in San Bruno, starting to work on Chinese immigration during the exclusion era. She didn't have to do this. She was not at my home institution, but she was, as so many of you know, unflinchingly generous and so eager to mentor the next generation. She agreed to serve on my dissertation committee, and she soon became one of my official advisors. I was asked to serve as her research assistant for Unbound Voices. And I also got to know her as a fellow board member on the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation. I was giving tours, just like Casey was describing, and Elizabeth and Joe Chan, giving those really early tours before the renovation. And of course, we were using all of Judy's works as our guide. And then in 2005, we both had the same idea that the centennial for Angel Island, the opening of Angel Island, was coming up in 2010, and somebody should do something about it. And Felicia Lowe, who is a good mutual friend of ours, had heard from each one of us that we had thought somebody should do something. And I still remember that meeting at Felicia's home when Judy and I sat down and said, well, what's your idea? And what's your idea? In all of these roles that Judy played in my life, first as this author of this cherished book, a community advocate and storyteller, as an academic, as Angel Island's historian, she broke through so many barriers. She made it possible for so many of us to be here, to take on new roles, new projects, and expand the work that she began. Her intellectual generosity, her mentorship, her commitment to not just community-driven research, but as Gordon mentioned, rigorous academic research, her scholarly meticulousness and brilliance has shaped my own work in countless ways, and especially in the way in which I seek to have my academic work speak to a larger public, and also the ways in which I treat my own graduate students. I thought I'd spend a few minutes to share specifically the experience of working on Angel Island, the book, with all of you, because I think it gives an insight in her enormous impact over time, but also more broadly. And I write a little bit about this in the collection of memories in Amerasia Journal. But I want you to come with me to one of our Angel Island events and to imagine a packed audience, whether it was the San Francisco Chinatown Cultural Center or the Historical Society in LA or the National Archives in DC. We had standing room only audiences, and they weren't the typical audiences coming to hear a scholarly talk. There were Asian Americans coming from every nook and cranny and coming to our event to hear these stories and to understand how they were part of our larger American past. I remember the lines for questions would start queuing up before we even sort of stopped talking. And they weren't there to see me, they were there to see Judy. They were asking question after question. They stood in long lines for the chance to really even to introduce themselves to her and to share their own stories. I was privileged to witness this outpouring of respect and gratitude from hundreds of people who came to our book events across the country. By 2010, Judy was known as one of the original historians whose activism, research, and writing had made sure that the Chinese immigration story and then the larger immigration story on Angel Island had been preserved and shared. But I want to remind everybody that this path was one of great obstacles and hardships. If we remember back 30 years earlier to the publication of Island with him, Mark, and Jenny Lim, we must remember that when those three worked on that project and when Judy was conducting all of those interviews, this was a period when when we were told not to talk about Angel Island, right? And our own family stories, we were told not to share our family histories. And when Judy commanded the respect of the people that she was interviewing and finally got them to trust her, they still were reluctant to share their names, to have them use their real names in the actual publication of the book. It was a hidden history, a shameful history that was just beginning to be shared with the larger public. But of course, the Chinese American community still felt extremely cautious and concerned about what that would mean. Let's fast forward then to 2010. By that time, because of that work, because of the work of the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation, there was still some residual fear, anxiety, and shame, but it had largely been turned into an understanding of resilience, perseverance, that this history was something that made us stronger and that it was something that was rooted not in the shameful Americans and Chinese immigrants, but in the larger systems of racism and white supremacy. So by 2010, this is when we have an outpouring of interest and community support in wanting to know more of these histories. When we did the research for Angel Island, Judy commanded a huge volunteer corps of people who were helping us enter data from 70,000 immigration case files in the National Archives of San Bruno, and translating documents, articles, and poems, locating more Angel Island families and sharing their own family histories with us. I know that some of you are with us. It was a sign of how much people had trust in Judy and how much they trusted her to tell their stories with humility, with honesty, and with truth. So that by the time then that Judy, him, Mark, and Jenny published the second edition of 2014, that dark shroud that had hidden the history of Chinese immigrant detention on Angel Island for so long had finally lifted. Unlike the first edition, the revised edition used the real names of original interviewees and included photographs of them. Today, the history of Angel Island is recognized as one of the most important chapters, not just of Chinese American, not just of Asian American history, but of American history. Judy's many books will be a fitting and enduring legacy of her lifetime work. But when I remember her, my co-author, my mentor, and my dear friend, I will also remember the crowds of people who wanted to tell Judy how she had inspired them to collect and preserve their own family histories. And this may be one of her most important and lasting legacies. She empowered so many of us to reclaim our histories for ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica. It's beautiful. So we have a few minutes. I think I'm looking at this program notes. I think we have 5 minutes or maybe 6 or 7 for some question and answers or any comments that others would like to make. So please let us know. Well, come on. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, thanks for all the history. I just wanted to point out, I was reminded that in the year 2000, I worked with artist Flo Oi Wong as director of Kearney Street Workshop. I worked with her on an art project at the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation. And she created these flags that contain the hidden secrets. They contain the hidden names of the true identities of Chinese who had come over. And we got about 200 people at the opening itself, even though it was 100 degrees. So that was building on Judy's work too, because Kearney Street Workshop visited that topic over and over again. And it was the beginning of people coming forth to claim their real identities in America.
Thank you. Canyon. Canyon Sam, I can see your hand is raised.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to add that when I had a book that I was based on oral histories, and I was into my 12th year with it. I'd had at least, I don't know, 70 rejections or 50 rejections. Or when I approached the University of Washington, and they liked it, and they said our best-selling book of all time is Angel Island. And I knew Judy, so I said, oh, great, you know. And she kind of coached me because by then she'd done many books with many different university presses. And but I was happy just to get a publisher that was reputable after 12 years. You know, I just agree with everything that everybody said about being so encouraging, so available. I was in this group called Unbound Feet in the 70s. And I first knew Judy then with Nancy Hom, Jenny Lim, and others. And that was in the late 70s. And Judy, that's when I first met her because she came to every single show, every single talk. You know, she knew everything, she knew everybody, and she was everywhere. And but I was quite young then, and this now was in the 90s. I'd never published a book. I've published a lot, things here and there, but I'd never published a book. My confidence was, down in the marshes. And at one point, it was so difficult with this publisher because they ran out of money, and then I had to pick up with things, and it was just a rocky road with the production. And one time I just remember that I called Judy in tears, and I said, they give me this impossible deadline. I don't have time to eat with this deadline. And I don't, anyway, I would call her periodically, and at one point she was uncharacteristically a little bit stern with me. And I said, I can't do it. I'm gonna quit. I really can't do it. I don't know what's gonna happen. And she said, no, you're not. No, you're not. And I said, well, it's impossible. So how am I gonna do it? And she said, and I said, why can't I? Because I guess I didn't want to go on and do that if she didn't agree, because I respected her so much, and they respected her. My publisher, really respected her. And so she said, because you're so close. You're very, very close. I'd never published a book. I didn't know about the timeline of book production, but I just didn't have any more juice, And she said, you can't give up now. So she forbid me from giving up. So I just wanted to share that because she could be tough, and I didn't really want to go against her. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I thought there was one hand up, and I don't see it up anymore. Oh, Danny, would you unmute and please speak?
My gosh, thank you so much. Yeah, this is so incredible. I wish I knew Judy Young when I was an undergrad. I graduated from UCSB in 2013. Shout out Professor Chang. I remember you were part of the external review committee. But anyway, I'm currently in library school, and I learned about Judy Young like after the fact, and I was so amazed to hear that she was the one who set up the Oakland Asian branch where I saw when I was growing up, And so like I didn't know that was the first Asian branch library established in the country. I was just curious that like she left to pursue life as an historian, but like did she ever talk about her past life as a librarian? Because she really does inspire my studies now.
My memory of her is she never stopped being a librarian, and she was always supporting librarians. Help me remember someone. Is it the librarian at Berkeley in Asian American Studies? Veronica, what was her name? Wei Chi Poon. Yes. She introduced me to Wei Chi Poon very early on, and that's how I got into the archives there at Berkeley and was able to do the research that I did for the I Hotel. And Wei Chi was her, she was mentored by Judy, and both of them were really incredible in getting me into archives and showing me how to use the library. She never stopped being a librarian. I can say that. Yeah. It looks like we are about out of time. Is that true? Or Veronica, would you like to say something? You have to unmute.
Hi, can you see us and hear us?
Yes.
Hi, we're Judy's family. This is her big sister, Sandy, and her niece, Veronica. And I just wanted to say thank you for this beautiful tribute, and to say thank you for the condolences, and to just encourage everyone to keep her legacy and her work alive, and keep on doing the work that she invested so much of her life doing. And we really appreciate all of the kind words that we're hearing. We listened to the whole thing, and we just wanted to say thank you so much.
Thank you. Judy's very special. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's see. I guess we're going to move on right now, and I would like to introduce our dean, Jasmine Alinder, back to this space. Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone.
Thanks, Karen. Well, this has been a remarkable and beautiful event, and I want to thank everyone who worked so hard to make this tribute to Judy Young possible, and everyone who presented and shared their thoughts with us today, including George Au, Bucky, Mana Hayakawa, Laura Collier-Chan, Kiyotong Ishikawa, Yukiya Jeriwaki, Gordon Chong, Bettina Apteker, Erica Lee, and Karen Te Yamashita and Alice Yang. Thanks to all of you who made time to participate. It's truly been an honor for me to attend. And speaking as a public historian myself, I want to say that my admiration for Judy Young is truly boundless. She saw possibilities for innovation in Asian American studies and public history and set a high standard for community engaged practice long before it was recognized by universities as a meaningful and valid scholarly activity. Her linguistic fluency and her ability to mine such a wide variety of primary sources from poetry and oral history and photography demonstrates a scholarly virtuosity that is rare. Her work recovered not just words and images, but also stories that tell us of the visions, hopes, and dreams without which may have otherwise been lost to us forever. As one of the poems from Angel Island advises, quote, "If you have but one breath left, do not be discouraged from your purpose," end quote. May this event today usher in a new era of celebrating and building upon Judy Young's purpose. We will strive to honor the legacy she's left to the humanities, to this campus, to Asian American history, and to all of who were fortunate enough to have known her. So before we open this up to any more of you to share your own remembrances of Judy, I'd like to invite you to contribute to the Judy Young Memorial Fund in Asian American Pacific Islander Studies. This fund will be used to support interdisciplinary research and programming related to AAPI studies at UC Santa Cruz, and will carry Judy's legacy into the future by creating an open and inclusive forum for nurturing intellectual exchange across disciplines. The highest priority of funding will be given to research projects and events that focus on oral history. I'm hoping a link has been shared in the chat that you can use. And I hope that you will consider making a one-time gift today or setting up a recurring gift so we can continue to honor Judy's memory for years to come. So that concludes the formal part of our program, but we would like to offer additional time now for anyone to share their thoughts, remarks, or remembrances. Please continue to use the raised hand function and we will call on you in turn. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure. Since Christine Hong has her hand raised, we'll just go to her.
Thanks, Alice.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Hong. I am the chair of a new department of critical race and ethnic studies on this campus. And I just wanted to say that for those of us who have been involved in the struggle for ethnic studies at Santa Cruz, which was very much a latecomer to the ethnic studies scene, we realize very much that this has been a passing of the baton. And I wanted to say that, many of you spoke about Judy's legacy in terms of oral history, in terms of her work for Angel Island, the significance of her scholarship. It's clear that her mentorship has, her mentorship has such broad influence far beyond our campus. But I also want to say that Judy was someone who had very unique foresight. And when she was involved, when she was in American Studies,
she and George Lipsitz, seeing that there was a dearth of certain areas of curricular coverage, came up with a plan, which was to have certain faculty who had expertise in certain areas of ethnic studies to work with students who are interested in courses in that area and develop peer-to-peer ethnic studies courses. And when I first came, so they started these about 20 years ago. When I came to this campus 12 years ago, there were a number of these still around. And I wanted to say that the oldest continuously offered ethnic studies course on the UC Santa Cruz campus is one called Philippine X. It used to be called Filipino, Philippine X Historical Dialogue. And after Judy inaugurated that, it has continuously every single year, even during the pandemic, been offered. It is now formalized as CRES 45. And in every single one of those student-initiated courses that Judy was behind, and it wasn't just in the field of Asian American studies or Pacific Islander studies, it expanded the entire gamut of ethnic studies. Every single syllabus said, one day this course will be formalized as part of an ethnic studies department. And as soon as CRES formed as a program, we had students knocking on our door. So I just wanted to say that part of Judy's legacy is also curricular. And even in CRES, which people will say like, wow, we're in our first year as a department, we actually owe a lot to people like Judy. So I wanted to be sure to pay tribute to her.
Thank you, Christine. Anyone else would like to share before we close? Sue, are you raising your actual hand?
Yeah, I am. You know, it was really neat to hear from all of you who have been her colleagues in academia, serving as colleagues or students or co-authoring books or doing research or meeting with her at Angel Island. I was lucky to attend one of her Chinatown tours somehow, just a few years ago, maybe right before she retired. And I said to her, you know, Judy, I think we've met before. You know, when you grow up in Chinatown, you know, everybody knows everybody sort of. And of course, I knew Judy's work, and I have her book, Island, which is full of little, I had dog-eared it and whatnot. And she looked at me, she says, yeah, I think I know you, and immediately struck up, a nice kind of a relationship. And one of the chat comments was, they said something about her just interacting with normal people. I'm just regular normal. I had no real association with her in any academic kind of relationship or anything. But I think if you grow up in Chinatown, you just know people, and then you see them, fulfilling their potential and making such a difference in the community and touching the lives of so many people, and people that she might not even realize, somehow she was in and out of my life. So when I heard about her passing, I knew I wanted to, participate in this and remember her. And yeah, just what she's done is really mind-blowing.
Thank you, Sue. Nancy?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nancy Kim. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director here of the resource centers at UC Santa Cruz, and I was fortunate enough to be one of Judy's students as an undergraduate. And I would say that she just influenced me in so many ways and was such a mentor. She was my advisor and she encouraged her students to teach and share knowledge. I taught a class on building coalitions between African American and Korean American communities. That was a couple of years after the LA uprisings, and she was so supportive and gave me so many connections to other folks to help build my curriculum. And my first class with her was Asian American women, which like blew my mind that could be a subject matter in university. And, you know, she really promoted intersectionality before that term became popular, you know. And just her influence really affected even my journey in academia, at graduate school. My master's thesis was on the Asian American women's course, so I really looked at her course pedagogy, and I came back to UCSC as a staff member to work in the Asian American Pacific Islander Resource Center. In fact, I think she was on my search committee that hired me. So I have just so much to be grateful for, having her mentorship, her influence, her championing me and so many others in the campus community and off-campus community. So I thank everybody who helped organize this space. It was really wonderful to come together and see familiar faces. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else? Gordon? Gordon, you're still muted.
I'm sorry, I'm so used to unmute. I just wanted to take a few moments to tell you, Jasmine, and for everyone who has hosted this segment, mainly because over the years, I would say the last, 6 decades, I always kept in touch with Judy. She and I started in grammar school together. We were at Gene Parker Elementary. I was with Judy for the 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. So knowing her in those grades and lost track of her after grammar school, over the years, I kept in touch with Judy because we were in Chinatown. And I used to go to the Chinatown Library and visit with Judy because she was my classmate. And I always dropped in and said hello. And she would make sure that I would have magazines to read at the periodical section and would encourage me to keep reading. In Chinatown, a lot of time we used to go there for visits, and Judy would lead us in these tours into the children's section and would recommend books. So over the years, whenever I meet with Judy, one of the things I've learned listening to everybody in today's program is, I remember when Judy used to be very focused. She would know what she would want to do next. And when she talked about, yeah, I'm going to go and not only get the degree in library science and then I want to go back to school. And then she was finding that in working with the elderly in the Chinatown Library, she felt that she needed to go back to school and learn Chinese formally, and was very fluent in it. And it was good to follow her down through the years. And then when she ended up going to UC Santa Cruz, I knew there was going to be good things happening at UC Santa Cruz, because Santa Cruz at the time that we were going to college, it was really at the forefront of a lot of hopes and dreams for the UC system. And I said it was appropriate that Judy would go there and work, because I know she would just blossom and help the university blossom. So I want to share with all of you, especially the ones who had a chance to learn with her, be with her in teaching and learning. It's a wonderful experience to look back on it. And I sincerely miss Judy because I've known her all these years. And I remembered the last time I saw her was up in Sacramento when she was doing her book presentation with Eddie. And Eddie was setting it up and selling books, and she was doing her talking. And then always an educator, and always someone who always encouraged anybody who met with her. So I just wanted to share that with all of you in today's program. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Gordon. John and Ann?
Hi. I first met Judy when I was a graduate student at UCLA, and I was working at the UCLA Asian American Studies Center. And I had a table next to her. She was selling books for the Chinese Historical Society. And I just remember we were at a conference, and there was a particular speaker that was speaking, and she wanted to hear him so badly, but she couldn't leave her desk. She wouldn't leave the desk. She was Wei Chi, and they wouldn't leave. But you could see she was just leaning forward, trying to hear through the doors. And so I finally told her, I said, I'll watch your desk. You go in. And she just ran in with her Wei Chi to listen to that lecture. And later when she came out, she was so thankful and everything. But it was that first meeting, what struck me more than anything else was she had an immense curiosity and interest in many, many things. Later, she told me she was a librarian, and she struck me as a librarian. She was demure, very quiet, and very orderly. I mean, so she struck me as that librarian. And as I got my degree and everything, I would run into her every now and then. And the other thing that struck me, the second thing that struck me was she was a real Chinatown girl. She was really hooked in to the San Francisco Chinese community. And she was one of the people who introduced me to Him Mark Lai. And Gordon's right, you know, Him Mark Lai could be, difficult to deal with. But Judy just had this knack with him that, she knew how to work with him very, very well. I remember I had the same reaction as Gordon when I walked in to Him Mark Lai's place. I said, how can he and Laura live in this place? There's no room for anything. But Judy would walk in and she would know where things were in his place, and she would help him. So it was quite amazing. But I think I got the true measure of her character when I served with her on the executive board of the Association for Asian American Studies. And this was a meeting in which the association almost collapsed because of a debate over a book, whether a book award should be given. It was Lois Yamanaka's work. And they wanted to, the people in Hawaii wanted to have this book banned from the libraries, banned from the schools. And Judy was the clearest voice on that executive board saying, we cannot do this. This is not who we are. And the last thing I want to say, as pleasant as Judy was, and I don't mean to say this as a downer, there was always something very sad about her too. And I came to realize that sadness was what gave her the ability to empathize with so many people and to empathize with her students. And so in that regard, that sadness was a positive, not a negative. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else like to share before we close? Jerry?
I just want to say that since we have all these academics on, I do want to say that I think Judy's work, her breadth of work, should be up in the pantheons of Asian American historical works, up like your Ronald Takakis, your Helen Zias. I think her name should be along with those. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree, Jerry. Christopher?
Yes, I just wanted to say how touched I am by this nice tribute to Judy. I was a student at Santa Cruz 27 years ago. It's hard to believe. But you know, when I think back to UC Santa Cruz, it was one of the happiest times. And, you know, it's all downhill from there. But you know, I guess there are many memories, good memories I have of Judy. You know, she was a very human person. And at the time I was a graduate student, and she, you know, treated me very kindly, you know. She would, you know, we would chat, you know, gossip even, you know. She would just go out to meals, and, you know, when I was struggling, she would offer to, you know, even take me into her home for, you know, if I needed to, or, you know, I would never take her up on that sort of thing, but I was just so grateful that she would, that was the kind of person she was, you know. You know, and I was also greatly inspired by Karen Yamashita. You know, I was Karen's TA, and you know, over the years I've lost contact with so many people. Unfortunately, I'm over here on the East Coast in Washington D.C., but in a very powerful way, I've been teaching books and you know, ideas that I learned 25 years ago in her classes, you know, and in Karen's classes. And I've been teaching the same books for the last 25 years, you know. And you know, it's a legacy that she's given to me, and that I've tried to share to my students all over the country. I've often found myself teaching at some schools that are where there's not very much critical mass of Asian Americans. But the Asian Americans that are there, you know, are really hungry, you know. And so, you know, that's the way I think her, you know, she keeps giving, inspiring, you know, and, you know, I teach courses at Georgetown, and the students don't have an Asian American Studies program. And, you know, we just saw about the 1968 state strike in SF State and Berkeley, and we're reading about, you know, how people are really committed to community, you know, and the students are really excited, right? They really want to do something. And I guess every generation is sort of, you know, grateful for, you know, those kinds of role models and those kinds of people who sacrificed and shared so much, you know. So, you know, it's hard to really say, you know, the immensity that impact she's had on our lives. And you know, I'm grateful. I literally wouldn't be here teaching what I'm teaching if it weren't for Judy and Karen. So thank you for the chance to share our stories.
Thank you, Christopher. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you're located. Thank you so much for sharing your generous memories of Judy Young. And I want to remind you that we are hoping to have another opportunity to come together around Judy's legacy later this academic year. And so we will keep you all informed as those plans come together. Thank you.